Inside Louisiana State Penitentiary. At the edge of the Mississippi River, surrounded on three sides by water and cut off from the nearest town by miles of open land, sits the largest maximum security prison in the United States, Louisiana State Penitentiary. This is a prison so large it operates like a town. So isolated that escape is nearly impossible. And so infamous that its nickname, Angola, still carries echoes of slavery, violence, and one of the most complex prison histories in America. What happens here is not legend. It is documented. And it is still unfolding. Before we go any further, if you value deeply researched, fully factual prison documentaries like this one, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Beyond the Bars. Your support helps us continue sharing more amazing, carefully verified stories from inside the world's most misunderstood institutions. A prison built on a plantation. Louisiana State Penitentiary occupies approximately 18,000 acres of land, an area larger than Manhattan. But long before it was a prison, this land was something else entirely. In the early 19th century, the property consisted of several slave plantations. The most prominent was named Angola, a reference to the African country from which many enslaved people were forcibly taken. This name would later become inseparable from the prison itself. After the American Civil War, Louisiana, like much of the South, faced economic collapse and labor shortages. One solution adopted by the state was convict leasing, a system in which incarcerated men, overwhelmingly black, were leased to private businesses and plantations. By 1901, the state of Louisiana formally purchased the Angola plantation and established what would become Louisiana State Penitentiary. From the beginning, incarceration here was inseparable from forced agricultural labor. Prisoners cleared land, planted crops, built levees, and constructed prison buildings by hand. Many historians and legal scholars have described the early years of Angola as a continuation of slavery under another name, a characterization supported by period records, mortality rates, and survivor accounts. This is not speculation, it is documented history. In the early 20th century, incarcerated men worked from sunup to sundown under armed supervision. Whippings, malnutrition, and disease were widely reported in state records and investigative journalism of the era. Deaths were common. Oversight was minimal. And escape was almost unheard of. The river, the swamps, and the isolation did most of the guarding. The scale of Angola. To understand Angola, you have to understand its size. The prison houses over 5,000 incarcerated men, making it not only the largest prison in Louisiana, but one of the largest in the world by land area. It contains multiple cell blocks, several dormitory-style housing units, industrial workshops, churches, a fire station, a hospice unit, miles of farmland worked by prisoners. Angola grows much of its own food. Prisoners farm crops and raise livestock, continuing a system of agricultural labor that has existed here for over a century. Unlike many prisons, Angola does not sit near an urban center. The nearest town, St. Francisville, is more than 20 miles away. Baton Rouge is over an hour's drive. This isolation is intentional. Three sides of the prison are bordered by the Mississippi River, which is fast-moving, wide, and dangerous. The fourth side is surrounded by swamps, dense vegetation, and open land. According to the Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections, no successful escape from Angola has occurred in decades, and many escape attempts historically ended in drowning, capture, or death, though exact numbers vary across historical periods and are not always fully documented. Angola is not just hard to leave. For many, it is impossible. Life sentences and death row. One of the most defining features of Louisiana State Penitentiary is who is sent there. Angola primarily houses individuals serving life sentences, prisoners convicted of violent felonies, incarcerated men classified as maximum security. For decades, Angola also housed Louisiana's death row, though execution methods and death row housing have changed over time due to legal rulings and policy shifts. Historically, Angola had one of the highest concentrations of prisoners serving life without parole in the United States. For much of the 20th century, a life sentence in Louisiana truly meant life. Parole eligibility was extremely limited, and many prisoners entered Angola knowing they would die there. As a result, Angola developed a reputation not simply as a prison, but as a place where time effectively stopped. Former wardens, journalists, and researchers have all noted that this reality shaped prison culture in profound ways. When the future is removed, violence, despair, and informal power structures often fill the vacuum. This environment would erupt into crisis by the mid-20th century. Angola before reform. By the 1950s and 1960s, Angola had become nationally infamous. Investigations by journalists and civil rights organizations described extreme overcrowding, racial segregation, routine violence, brutal disciplinary practices. In 1951, a group of incarcerated men committed an act so shocking it drew national attention. 11 prisoners deliberately cut their Achilles tendons in protest of brutal conditions, hoping to be transferred to a hospital or another facility. The incident became known as the Heel String Gang. This was not rumor. It was confirmed by medical records and state investigations. Public outrage followed. But meaningful reform was slow. For decades, Angola operated with minimal oversight. Guards were often poorly trained and underpaid. Some disciplinary practices, such as extended solitary confinement and physical punishment, were later challenged in federal court. The prison was violent not because of myth, but because of documented policy failures. By the 1970s, Angola faced mounting lawsuits alleging constitutional violations under the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. Change was coming, but it would be forced by the courts, not volunteered. The beginning of federal intervention. In 1975, a federal judge ruled that conditions at Angola were unconstitutional. The decision cited inadequate medical care, unsafe living conditions, lack of meaningful supervision, rampant violence. This ruling marked a turning point. The state of Louisiana was ordered to implement sweeping reforms. Federal oversight increased. Policies began, slowly, to change. But reforming Angola would prove far more complicated than issuing court orders. The prison was deeply entrenched in tradition, isolation, and a culture shaped by generations of neglect. What followed would redefine Angola's identity, for better and for worse. And at the center of that transformation would be one man whose tenure remains one of the most controversial in American corrections history. The arrival of Warden Burl Cain. In 1995, Louisiana State Penitentiary entered a new era. That year, Burl Cain was appointed Warden of Angola, a position he would hold for more than 2 decades. Cain did not arrive quietly. At the time of his appointment, Angola was still widely regarded as one of the most dangerous prisons in the United States. Murders, stabbings, and assaults were routine. Incarcerated men and correctional officers alike faced daily risk. Cain publicly stated that Angola was out of control when he took over, a claim supported by internal disciplinary records and contemporaneous media reporting. His solution would be unconventional, controversial, and deeply polarizing. Cain believed that faith-based programming, combined with strict order and inmate responsibility, could reduce violence in a prison where most men would never be released. This belief would soon reshape Angola's national image. Religion as a cornerstone of control. Under Cain's leadership, Angola dramatically expanded its religious programs, particularly Christian ones. The most well-known initiative was the establishment of the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary at Angola, which opened in 1995 as a satellite campus inside the prison. Incarcerated men could apply to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree in Christian ministry, taught by outside professors who traveled to the prison. Graduates of the program became inmate ministers, assigned to Angola's housing units and later to other Louisiana prisons. According to prison officials, violence declined significantly during Cain's tenure. Official statistics showed reductions in homicides and serious assaults compared to prior decades. However, these outcomes remain subject to debate. Civil liberties organizations and legal scholars raised concerns that religious programming was disproportionately favored over secular rehabilitation. Prisoners felt pressure to participate to receive privileges. Non-Christian faiths received fewer resources. Multiple lawsuits were filed alleging violations of the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. Some resulted in settlements requiring Angola to expand accommodations for other religions. What is clear, and well documented, is that religion became a central organizing force inside Angola, influencing daily routines, housing assignments, and informal leadership structures. Supporters called it rehabilitation. Critics called it coercion. The truth, as with much of Angola's history, is complex. The Angola Rodeo. Few events symbolize Angola's contradictions more clearly than the Angola Prison Rodeo. First held in 1965, the rodeo became a major public event during Cain's tenure, drawing thousands of spectators from across Louisiana and beyond. Held annually, the rodeo features bull riding, bronco riding, wild horse events, convict poker, where inmates sit at a table as a bull is released. Participation is voluntary, and inmates receive small payments for competing. Proceeds from ticket sales fund prison programs and inmate welfare initiatives. Supporters argue the rodeo provides financial support for educational and recreational programs. A rare connection between the prison and the outside world. Critics counter that it turns incarceration into spectacle, exposes prisoners to serious injury, blurs ethical lines between punishment and entertainment. Serious injuries have occurred at the rodeo, including broken bones and concussions, though fatalities are not publicly documented. Despite controversy, the rodeo continues with state approval and remains one of Angola's most recognizable institutions. It is neither secret nor underground. It is openly sanctioned. The Angola Hospice. One of the most widely praised, and carefully studied, programs at Angola is its inmate-run hospice. Established in the late 1990s, the hospice was created to care for terminally ill prisoners, many of whom were serving life sentences and had no family support. Trained inmate volunteers provide basic nursing care, emotional companionship, end-of-life comfort. Medical oversight is provided by licensed professionals, but the day-to-day presence often comes from fellow prisoners. The program has been featured in peer-reviewed medical journals, documentaries, and national news reports as a rare example of compassionate care within a maximum security prison. Importantly, participation is voluntary, and training standards are documented. Researchers have noted that the hospice reduced deaths in isolation and improved quality of life for terminally ill inmates. Even critics of Angola's broader system have acknowledged the hospice as a meaningful humanitarian achievement. It stands in stark contrast to the prison's violent past. The Angola 3. No examination of Angola is complete without addressing the case of the Angola 3. The term refers to three incarcerated men, Albert Woodfucks, Herman Wallace, and Robert King, who were held in solitary confinement for decades. Woodfucks and Wallace were accused of murdering a correctional officer in 1972. King was held in isolation on a separate conviction. All three were associated with the Black Panther Party, a fact cited by supporters as evidence of political retaliation, and by prison officials as irrelevant to security decisions. Their confinement conditions included 23 hours per day in a small cell, limited human contact, minimal access to programs. Human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, labeled their treatment as prolonged solitary confinement and called for their release. Over time, Woodfucks and Wallace had their convictions overturned multiple times due to procedural issues, including jury selection problems and ineffective counsel. Herman Wallace was released in 2013 after his conviction was vacated. He died days later from liver cancer. Robert King was released in 2001. Albert Woodfucks was released in 2016 after more than 43 years in solitary confinement, the longest known such confinement in U.S. history. The case remains one of the most scrutinized prison justice controversies in modern American history. Praise, criticism, and unresolved questions. By the time Burl Cain retired in 2016, Angola was no longer universally described as America's most violent prison. Homicides had declined. Programs had expanded. National media coverage had shifted in tone. Yet fundamental questions remain unresolved. Can a prison built on forced labor ever truly reform? Does faith-based control reduce violence, or suppress it? Are life sentences without parole compatible with rehabilitation? Angola today exists in tension between progress and legacy. It is safer than it once was. But it is still a place where thousands of men will die behind bars. And the story is not over. A day inside Angola. For the men incarcerated at Louisiana State Penitentiary, each day begins the same way. Counts are conducted multiple times daily. Movement is controlled. Schedules are rigid. Angola houses prisoners in a mix of cell blocks and open dormitories, depending on custody level, behavior history, and job assignments. Dormitories may house dozens of men in a single open space, while maximum security tiers consist of locked cells. Daily life is structured around work assignments, meals, recreation periods, religious or educational programming, medical appointments. For many incarcerated men, routine is not just order, it is survival. Because the majority of Angola's population is serving life sentences or extremely long terms, time is measured not in months or years, but in decades. This reality shapes behavior in ways that distinguish Angola from short-term correctional facilities. There is little incentive to impress parole boards. There is no countdown to release. There is only adaptation. Inmate labor and the fields. One of Angola's most enduring, and controversial, features is prison labor. Thousands of incarcerated men work daily in agriculture, maintaining crops, livestock, and infrastructure across the prison's vast acreage. Jobs include field labor harvesting crops, cattle and hog farming, grounds maintenance, facility repairs, kitchen and laundry work. Inmates are paid small daily wages, typically ranging from a few cents per hour to under $1 per day, depending on assignment and policy period. This labor is legal under the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which permits involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime. However, critics argue that Angola's plantation-style labor system mirrors the racial and economic dynamics of its past. Supporters within the Department of Corrections contend that work provides structure, skills, and operational self-sufficiency. The debate is ongoing, and it is not theoretical. It is visible every morning in the fields. Race, power, and informal order. Race has always played a central role in Angola's history. From its origins as a slave plantation to its early 20th century convict labor system, Angola's incarcerated population has been disproportionately black, reflecting broader racial disparities in Louisiana's criminal justice system. While the prison is officially desegregated, researchers and journalists have documented informal racial groupings in housing, work crews, and social spaces, patterns that emerge in many long-term confinement settings. Power inside Angola does not rest solely with correctional officers. Influence can also come from job assignments, religious leadership roles, seniority and longevity, access to informal networks. Prison officials have acknowledged the existence of inmate hierarchies but maintain that security classifications and supervision mitigate their impact. Violence today is significantly lower than in previous decades, but tensions remain. Angola is calmer, but not neutral. Education and programs. In addition to religious programming, Angola offers secular education and vocational training, though availability has varied over time based on funding and policy. Programs have included GED preparation, literacy courses, vocational certifications in trades such as carpentry and welding, college correspondence courses. Because most incarcerated men at Angola are not eligible for release, these programs are often framed not as re-entry preparation, but as quality-of-life initiatives. Studies have shown that education reduces disciplinary infractions, even among prisoners with no parole prospects. However, access is limited, and waiting lists are common. Opportunities exist, but they are not universal. Medical care and aging behind bars. Angola is, increasingly, a prison for the elderly. Because so many incarcerated men are serving life sentences, the prison has a growing population of prisoners over 50, 60, and even 70 years old. This has created unique medical and logistical challenges. Chronic illness management. Mobility limitations. Dementia and cognitive decline. End-of-life care. In addition to the hospice program, Angola operates a large medical complex that provides on-site treatment. Serious cases are transferred to outside hospitals under guard. Federal court rulings require constitutionally adequate medical care, but lawsuits alleging deficiencies have continued into the 21st century. The cost of incarcerating aging prisoners is significantly higher than that of younger populations, a reality acknowledged by state officials. For many men at Angola, aging does not bring release. It brings infirmary beds, oversight, media, and transparency. Angola is one of the most documented prisons in America. Over the years, it has been the subject of national investigative journalism, academic research, documentaries, court-monitored reform efforts. At the same time, access remains tightly controlled. Media visits are supervised. Interviews require approval. Some areas remain off-limits. Transparency has increased compared to the mid-20th century, but critics argue that true accountability is still limited by the prison's isolation and scale. Angola is visible, but only on its own terms. What Angola represents. Louisiana State Penitentiary is not an anomaly. It is an extreme example of American incarceration, where history, punishment, race, labor, faith, and power converge in one place. Angola has changed. It is safer. It is more structured. But it remains a prison built to hold men for life. Whether Angola represents reform, restraint, or resignation depends on who is asked, and what future the country chooses for its justice system. The story does not end at the gates. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching Beyond the Bars. Stories like Angola's aren't easy, but they matter. They force us to confront history, power, punishment, and what justice really looks like behind closed gates. If this documentary added clarity, challenged your perspective, or helped you understand the reality of life inside America's prisons, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Your support directly helps us continue producing deeply researched, fully factual stories like this one. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Respectful discussion is always welcome. Until next time, stay informed. And stay beyond the bars.